Hello everybody and welcome to YouTube Mall Builders Tuesday night show. Tonight's a little different. What we're going to do is do a layout tour with Chris Heili of MRL Trains. He's got his layout now where he can run a train completely around. He just had an open house about a month or so ago, so he had to finish it up to where he could get to where it run a train. So that said, go to YouTubeMallBuilders.com. There you can check the schedules for the Tuesday and Wednesday shows. Those are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The Thursday and Saturday show is 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And we do have a schedule there for the live show also. And be sure and click on the eMag. JD and his team do a great job on providing us with a free magazine with a lot of good content, a lot of good articles in it, written by people in the community for the community. So be sure to check that out and sign up for email notifications. So when the magazine comes out, you get notified. It does come out as PDF, so it allows you to load it on a wide range of devices so you can have it with you wherever you're at. Oh, let's see now, what else can I add in here to kill a little time? We're getting some feedback from somebody. But anyway, guess I'll turn it over to Chris now, let him start showing us his layout, what he's had done, and what the future is going to be on it. So let's see, get back over here, and it's all yours, Chris.
All right, thanks, Johnny. Welcome everybody. Something a little different tonight. Instead of the Arduino show, we're just gonna show off my layout a little bit now that I have it up and running. So first thing I'll do is just give you a little history and backstory on it. What I'm modeling is the Mullen Pass, Montana Rail Link, and Burlington Northern in about 1995, give or take, just before the BNSF merger. And what it is basically is Burlington Northern run-through trains with MRL helpers and a few MRL local and through trains. For those of you that don't know, the Montana was basically created in 1988 or 87, and they bought a chunk of mainline from the Burlington Northern over the Mullen Pass, and most of the way through Montana it was a secondary line, and they saved money and things were back with a 66-year lease to the Montana Rail Link of their main line, and then they sold off all the branch lines and even the secondary main line. To do that was because originally it was Northern Pacific, and there were some bonds still out there or something that they couldn't actually sell it for 66 years yet, so they did a long-term lease to the Montana Rail Link. And so it's basically bridge traffic, and the Montana, the helper service up over Mullen Pass as well as Bozeman Pass, and actually operate the trains when they come over the system. So you see a lot of how's that? Any better? Okay. So it's basically, traffic. So, and being just pre BNSF merger, you see Santa Fe locomotives and rolling stock. My goal is to recreate. Okay, let me try something different here. Apologize, we're having some audio problems here. Let me just try closing something. Is that any better now? If not, I'll switch over to the phone right away. Yeah, but I got video freeze up, so yeah, it was all good before before we went live, of course, and now the gremlins show up. So what I'm modeling is really only about a 20-mile stretch in real life, and I'm not even modeling the entire, cutting out portions of those 20 miles. So unlike a lot of model railroads that have a lot of towns and they're modeling a couple hundred miles in a layout, I'm only, from the beginning of my layout to the end of it is only 20 miles in real life, and I'm only modeling about 5 of those in scale. I'm gonna just switch to my, whoops, muted you a little too soon. I'm gonna switch to my iPhone so I can walk around and show you everything. So I might drop out for a second, but I'll be right back if I do. Okay, can you hear me? All right, so I'm just gonna start show you the drawings real quick so you understand what the layout is, and then I'll take you around and actually show you the layout. So this is a drawing of the lower level. So that's basically the entire layout on the lower level. And it starts at the Helix and works its way into the Helena yard. And from there, it goes out and begins a climb, and it's just climbing all the way uphill all the way. And then I'll go over the drawing. The upper deck, hopefully you can kind of see that. It's very similar. It's about the same footprint as the lower deck. So you kind of end up running over the top of yourself all the way till you get back to the Helix. And what the Helix is I have a staging deck, and here's the drawing for the staging deck, and that's just below the upper deck. So all the staging is fed from the Helix. It's the only way in and out of staging is through the Helix. So in reality, the Helix is the start and the end of the layout. So you come out of staging and you either go down the Helix and enter the layout, or you go up the Helix to enter the layout. And then the layout is a point-to-point, simulating an uphill climb from Helena all the way west to Blossburg at the summit of the Mullen Pass. So kind of in a nutshell, one more time, if you come out of staging, come down the Helix, you end up in Helena Yard, which would be the east end of my layout. And there's not a lot of classification in this yard. It's mostly a division point crew change yard. And from there, there's a few blocks cut off for locals, but other than that, there's not a lot of switching. And then the trains head out west to go start climbing the Mullen Pass. And they stop at the Helena Junction Y when they need to cut in helpers. The helpers will be waiting out here on one leg of the Y, and they'll actually cut in mid-train helpers to help it go up the pass. So from there, you start heading down this way and begin your climb up the 2.2% grade. Now, I only modeled 1.6% because I, run out of ceiling. The ceiling would get in the way long before I got to the summit if I did 2.2%. So even though in real life, that's what I'm trying to simulate, it's 1.6. And in model terms, it's actually really pretty good. I'm glad it wasn't any steeper than what I ended up modeling. So here you're climbing. You get to, I put in a single turn Helix that's going to be hidden, and its sole purpose is to lengthen a siding that begins right here. So then it'll come around and do one loop on this Helix and end up coming out here for the other end of the siding. So that hidden loop allows me to actually put a 60-car train on the siding for having meets. There's not a lot of switching on this layout, really none at all, other than at the Helena Yard. The sole purpose of this is running long trains and using helper service and having meets. So that's one place where you'll be having meets on the hill, is at the it's called Austin, and you'll see that in a few minutes when we get there. So the Austin siding can actually stage hold a 60 car train of, and when I say 60 cars, I use 50-foot box cars as my unit of measure. So before we go to the layout, I'll just show you the staging real quick. This was designed, the yard throat right here is designed to allow you to come off of any track and go to any of the tracks on the 2-track Helix. It's a double-track Helix, so this yard throat right here kind of allows you to come off of any track and take any one of the tracks either up or down on the Helix. And then on the other end of staging, there's a return loop, and it's actually 2 tracks because I can use the inner track as a staging track and the outer track as just kind of like your runner to run your trains in and out of staging. But by using that inner loop, I can actually stage like a 200 and let me look on my list here. Actually 185 car train could be staged on that track. The rest of them, the ones you see in black that are longer, those can hold about 70 cars each. And then there's the shorter ones that end up here. Those can hold like 45 cars each. So it's actually quite a massive staging yard. I really realize when I'm running this type of layout, you need to have a lot of staging. So I really put an emphasis on it. I know there's people that disagree that you don't need a lot of staging, but it's the only way this layout's going to work. I actually could use more. I have 9 tracks, and I can stage a total of, I think it's 594. When I look at the drawing, I actually have the chart on there. A total of 594 50-foot cars can be held in this staging yard. So, but just from the little bit of running I've been doing now that I have it complete, I'm finding out that I probably could have used a few more tracks, but we'll see. I planned the layout for typical train and operating session being about 60 cars. So all my passing sidings can handle a 60-car train. But we also have the capability of running a full length 120, 125 car train. And it's pretty cool in real life, you know, in the time I'm modeling, a typical coal train would be about 120 to 125 cars, and there would actually be about 15 locomotives required to get that up and over the 2.2% grade of the Mullen Pass. You know, it'd be like 6 or 7 SD40s and SD45s on the head end. And then he'd use 2 different sets of 4 mid-train helpers cut in 2 different places. So, you know, that's a total of up 14 or 15 locomotives. And I'm going to be doing that on occasion. So that's kind of what the whole reason I built this layout. So let's start out with a real quick tour of staging. I'll take you over here to the Helix. I think a lot of you guys have probably seen this on my videos, but if you haven't, this is my Helix, and I built it using a method that I found actually on YouTube. So, you know, very appropriate for YouTube model builders. A guy by the name of Jeff Johnson is the guy who posted videos on how he built this. And I was looking for all different ways to build a Helix. And I really wasn't happy with any of them until I found this one. This one really fit the bill. It was easy to build, and it was very sturdy. I mean, I've seen guys using the all thread to adjust their levels, and I've seen guys that use like double layers of plywood overlapping to build it up. But this method is really pretty easy to do. These spacer blocks are glued on the bottom and then screwed on the top. And I just kind of staggered them and tried to keep them close. But, you know, basically you build your first level and you use your typical risers underneath that to get it set. And once you have that first level set, you just cut a bunch of these blocks exactly the same height, and you just start stacking it up as you go, and it holds whatever you set that first loop, it holds that same grade perfectly all the way up to the top. So if we go into the Helix here from the staging level, I mean from the Helena yard, I've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, and then you get to staging. So this is the entry to staging. If you continued on, there's actually one more loop above it, and that takes you to the upper deck. And then I did put in a bypass loop, so that allows me to actually do continuous running for a show train, like an open house or whatever. So this inside track right here can just go right back down the Helix to the bottom of the layout, run the whole layout, and end up back here again. So if you did, keen eyes will observe that I do have a tortoise on there. And there's one over here. Those are the 2 switches, because I did have tortoises and some of the NCE switchets that I had from previous, and I said, well, I'll go ahead and use them. But most of you guys who know me know I'm getting big into the servos. So the rest of the layout has got these servos for controlling the switches. That's on the staging yard right here. And I'll get back to that in a little bit, but I just thought it might be interesting for those of you guys that know me and know that I'm into the servos, that I actually do have a couple tortoises on the layout. So let's pretend we just came out of staging. In fact, I'm going to have Phil go ahead and start a train out of staging, and we'll catch up to it a little bit later. So in fact, before we do the rest of the layout, I'll just show you how big the staging actually is. I'm going to start way back there in the corner is the Helix, and it comes around, and if this is going too fast, Johnny, just let me know. I'm not sure how it looks on your end, but try and keep this. Yeah, okay. That's probably just these pieces of wood going by. Okay, so from here, here's another little ladder that takes it from 9 tracks down to 6. And then it continues on down. But what we're going to do is there's a intermodal train right here. We're going to take that for a run around the layout. So I'm going to get Phil started with that. But how's it now? Okay, I'll get back in the other room in a second then. So over here, I've got 3 trains that are all ready to go. Is that any less blurry?
Yeah.
Okay, so here at this end, I've got 3 trains ready to go on the first 3 tracks. And the 4th track that's next to it, that's empty, that's the runner for, comes off the return loop. And there's a little ladder right here. So this is the start of the return loop, and it just goes out and around and then comes back over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this locomotive right here, and it's a double stack train, and we'll take that for a ride around the layout. So while Phil gets that over to the Helix, I'll take you down to the Helena yard, and we'll start the tour, and he'll catch up to us. Hey, Phil, I redid the macros. They're just the number of the track, 1 through 9 from the front to the back. I just had to tell him I made a change since last time he was here operating. But one of the things, and this is something you guys all might want to consider doing too if you have operating sessions or plan to, is find a guy like Phil who's very interested, maybe has a layout of his own and is an excellent operator, and make him your right-hand man. We're kind of doing that for each other. You know, I'm learning his layout, he's learning mine, so that when we bring new people over, he can help train them. So hopefully at the end of the day, he'll know my layout as good as I do, and vice versa, so that we always have somebody to rely on. Because if you ever have an operating session, you'll find that you're running 5 different directions at any given time if you have a bunch of guys out there trying to run trains. So it really helps to have somebody that's extremely knowledgeable about your layout.
Are you are
Yeah,
you
go
both
ahead.
both have the same kind of operating car forwarding program? So you both are familiar with it, or you two separate railroads have two separate car forwarding system and different rules?
Well, I'll be using JMRI, but I probably don't really need to use it a whole lot because most of my trains will be unit trains.
So does he use JMRI switch list?
He's starting to get into it. He hasn't yet, but I think that's what he plans on using.
Okay.
But
You'll be familiar with yours.
The neat part is he's actually doing a BNSF on what they call the High Line in northern Montana. The line I'm doing is the southern Montana line. So he's actually doing pretty similar to what I'm doing, but on a different line. And he actually has an MRL interchange that he built onto his, so we could literally interchange cars if we wanted to. But he's doing the Marias Pass, and he's doing a bunch of towns and industries for switching. It's going to be really nice when he's done. It's a very large layout too, so
you both are
hard.
Sorry.
He's pushing hard to get it done for October for an open house to be able to run trains around the whole layout at his place. So.
You both are interchanging cars together.
We could theoretically. So just to show you real quick, here's the Helix. So as you come out of the Helix, as you enter Helena in real life, it's a double main, and there's a crossover here. There would be a second crossover going back the opposite way. There's two crossovers, so you could cross over from either track. I didn't have the room, so I only put in the one crossover coming out of the Helix. But as you can see, these two tracks to the left are main 1 and main 2 that end up going kind of bypassing the yard. You know, they're newer tracks, I think, and
yeah, they're bypass through. They're more modern day where they would take the full train and crew change them.
Right, so you can actually see the one main comes right off, and the other one now comes into the yard itself. So here's your ladder tracks yard at one end. Now I had to put this big curve in mine because I didn't have enough room, but you know, in real life it doesn't curve like that. But here's my mock-up of the I-15 overpass. It cuts over the yard toward the south end or the east end. So all the scenery you see on here right now is just mock-up. Nothing is for real yet. So this is just some wood and foam board. I was moving around trying to get the look of where I want to place it. So all the scenery that's on here now is mock-up just for getting the look and feel, because I've actually, you know, looking at pictures, trying to get this to be as close to realistic as I can. So all the yard track configurations are very close to the prototype. The only difference is some are missing. I didn't have room to put them all in, but what is here is very similar in look and configuration to the real thing.
How many crews does your yard take up in your operating session pattern?
How many what?
Operators does your yard take? Do you have two yard throw workers and a yard master, or do you have one guy running the whole yard?
I'm only going to need one guy because there'll be very little classification. It's mostly just going to be when a through train comes in, it might set out an entire block and then pick up a block and just go. And then that block will probably just go to one of the locals. So there'll be very little classifying. It's only going to require one yard master. But this is where the heart of the operations are. These are where they park the helpers. So I've got 2 sets of 4 helpers here ready to go. And what would happen is typically the trains would come in here. I've got a big old passenger train we're just running for fun. It's a big boy. And a couple Athearn passenger cars that I just had a blue stripe painted on, so they, you know, kind of MRL look to them. But for the tortoises. It's just, hang on one second. It's just accessory, select accessory 1. And then 1 for, I gotta show them how to throw the tortoises. So this is my mock-up of the depot. It's just a foam board mock-up I was just trying to get the scale, and I actually went and just painted in concrete platforms, trying to get the correct look and feel for what, to see if I liked it before I actually put the tracks in. So that thing is over 3 feet long, close to 40 inches, and I'm going to be scratch building that depot someday. That's going to be a fun project. There's going to be very few buildings on this layout, but that's going to be one of them, and that'll be enough work to be sufficient for a few buildings. One of the other buildings is just a little maintenance building out here in the yard.
Yard office?
Yep, yard office. This is my mock-up of a sanding tower. These cars where they bring in the sand and the fuel. And of course, there's the other end of the yard ladder right here.
Does
Oh, okay. Those were just actually the names of the tracks. I found a place that actually named, you know, a map that actually had the names of the tracks. So I marked them on there so my operators could start getting used to them. This was one of the first parts of the layout I built, and some of you guys know I actually had my old layout still up and running for a while. That was in the other room. And once this yard was built, I connected it to the old layout. And we actually did have some operating sessions for a while, up until I tore down the old layout. So, 1 second here, I gotta help out Phil. So that would be select accessory 31. These are the numbers of each one. And then 1 is normal, reverse is thrown. And now, now if you just hit it twice, hit the recall button, or the same select accessory, just hit it twice in a row, and it throws the same switch the opposite way. Mm-hmm. There you go. So we're just lining them up to get out of staging right now. So,
well, those
no, don't go across. Go straight up.
Oh, you can go up and top?
Yeah, go up and come. Okay. Go up and come downhill. Right. The way I have the trains lined up, they should never have to use the crossover anymore.
I'm an eastbound.
What? Yeah, go ahead and bring it down the hill first, I guess. I never tested it that way, so that's one thing that's pretty interesting is I've had this up and running for a month now, and I have not even run a single train with helper service yet, because the little bit of time I've had to actually run trains, what I'm doing is I've got a list of the prototype trains that actually came through Helena around the time that I'm modeling. So what I've been doing is building trains slowly, testing them, seeing if they can make it up and down, trying to find the limit of how big the train can be without helper service. And so far I've got about 6 of them set up that way. You know, I keep adding a few cars and running it around the layout. It actually takes quite a bit of time because it takes over 20 minutes to run the layout. So as I've been testing, I've gotten to the point I've got about 6 trains done and I can run the layout in one way or the other without helper service. So anyways, back to this.
Those tortoises, will that be on JMRI CTC panel one of these days, or is there going to be a local control panel? Or
yeah, I actually have a JMRI panel built that I can throw them from the JMRI panel. I can also throw them with my throttle right now because they have the NCE switches that allow you, that connect it to your DCC system. It's a accessory decoder is what it is, so it'll allow you to throw a turnout. And I also have those servos in the yard at that one end. I have 7 servos in right now, and those can all be thrown either with your throttle or with the JMRI panel.
Okay. Are all switches in the yard Caboose Industry throws?
All the ones right now are manual throws. Eventually, I probably will make them automatic, only because I don't like the size of the, I use the N scale Caboose ground throws mostly. I have a few other oddballs like this one that I've had that I just put on here for now just to be able to throw the switch. But I think I will eventually end up automating all of them, but finding a way to let the guy manually throw it but just having a more prototypical looking switch stand.
Mm.
So from this end of the yard, you see that you still have your two mains over here, lead coming out, and eventually that yard lead joins back in with one of the mains. And then you'll see it back here. There's a switch, and it comes off and goes along the back. There's a couple industries back there. These are just mock-ups. Once again, they're not. Eventually, I'll put the real-looking buildings there. But right across the street from the depot, there's actually a little old Team Track intermodal ramp, if you will, or a little ramp for loading flat cars or whatever. And then there's this one track that comes right up to the depot. The only thing I've ever seen it used for is I've seen passenger cars sitting on it, but not sure what it's really there for, but it's there in real life, and I put it here. So
that was probably, back in the day, that was probably the RPO or something like that there, or extra storage for passenger cars to add passenger cars that didn't go further on of the line.
Yeah, very, very well could be.
Does MRL still see passenger service over the railroad line then?
No, all the Amtrak goes up along on the High Line through northern Montana, the one that Phil is doing. But I will eventually have an Amtrak for when they I think on a rare occasion they have detoured over this track, so I'll probably use that as an excuse to run some passenger. But they also have, the owner of the railroad has a set of custom cars that are just beautiful. If you Google, the MRL passenger cars, they're all silver and blue. So they have like two of these Vista Domes, and they got a really beautiful observation car on the end that's got like chrome and sliding glass doors on the back, that faces away. Like here, I'm just using the old Ather and Beaver tail one, but I just painted a blue stripe on these for now, just to have the officer's special, if you will, the owner's train to run through. So, but that does run on occasion, so I'll be able to eventually make some of those and run them too. But right here next to the depot is Beatty Park, and they actually have an old Northern Pacific 10-wheeler on display there. Right now, I just grabbed the only thing I had in the box that was close. It's a 260 Chicago Northwestern. But eventually I'll be building the correct, locomotive and a chain link fence around it and stuff. It's just on display at the park next to the depot. And this is North Roberts Road. And what's really cool, if you look through my YouTube channel, you'll find a video once back. If you set the camera like right here and look toward the depot and everything in the yard, this shot right here looks almost exactly like the real thing. I did a video where I toggled back and forth between a Google Street View and a picture that I took with my GoPro sitting right here. It's damn close. It's pretty impressive. It's kind of fun, really. When you do something like that after you've been trying hard to make it look real, it really makes your day, I guess. There's a lot of little details like this little truck sitting right here. My friend custom painted that for me in exchange for a truck that I gave him. But there's often on MRL, if you look in pictures, you'll see one of their trucks sitting like right there alongside the depot. They actually use the depot now as their headquarters. They don't dispatch out of there, but it is their headquarters, operating headquarters, if you will. So you'll see a lot of trucks around, and the employee parking over here next to the depot and things like that. So just trying to pick up on all those cool little details. Even like right here. Oh, go ahead.
If I remember from MRL, the track, when I used to have a Video Plus subscription, are they controlled through computer dispatching CTC signals, or are they ABS?
No, it's all CTC. They had one section for a while that was not, but I believe it's now pretty much 100% CTC. Interesting part, and I'll get to it in a minute. Remind me when we get to the Helena Junction why, if I don't bring it up, was there was actually a section of it for a while that the BN did not give up right away and was actually dispatching a section right in the middle of MRL's territory. And we'll get to where that starts in a second, but I'll just finish up and get around the corner here first. But
CSX, and CSX had that same problem with Conrail split up here at Junction.
So if you look on the map, you know, it's kind of cool if you go to like Google Earth and look at, you can see where the track configuration is. The real track configuration is similar to this, but it just doesn't curve around like this. But it's kind of weird because the two mains were like this, and all of a sudden the one just kind of goes wide and crosses way over to pick up the yard lead. And then the two of them kind of come back together again like this. They just don't really do it on a curve like I'm doing it. So, you know, mine looks a little bit different. But, and then the distance from this switch down to the crossover was down quite a ways beyond this, but I had to condense that a little bit to make sure I got it in. So from this point, you're back down to the two mains, and you head out to Helena Junction where there's a Y. Now I'm going to be building a table right here. I didn't get rid of it yet because I have to tear down my workbench, and eventually I'll be building a little leg. In fact, I'll show you on the drawing. So if you can see that little leg with the Y on it there. And that's actually a major component I need for the operations, because those 8 helpers I showed you in the yard, if we're running like a 120 car coal train, those 8 helpers come out and park on this leg of the Y, and then the train comes out and they'll cut in like 4 helpers about 35 cars back, and then another 4 helpers another 35 or 40 cars back. So this is where a lot of the cutting into the helpers will happen. If they're just head-end helpers on a smaller intermodal train or something like that, they'll do it right in the yard. But any of the mid-train helpers get cut in out here. Oh, I heard a horn. Let's see what's happening. Oh, here we go. Here comes our stack train now. Just coming through the Helena yard, getting ready to head up the hill.
Is the stack train getting helpers?
Not right now. It's just a short one. It's only about 22 or 23 wells on this one.
Okay.
I typically call them cars, but I'm trying to be correct tonight because I'm sure somebody will say they're not cars, they're units or wells. It's probably only about 5 cars in reality, but each car is 5 units. So some of these I have are just 2s or even singles, but some of them are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, there's a 5 car unit. So heading out this way now, he's just getting out to the Y. And if we were going to cut in a helper, this is where we would do it.
Is the Y going to like some branch line or something, or is it just used during the helper engines?
Well, it's just going to be a little stub right now, but I was actually thinking, I have a lot of friends who do like to do a lot of local industry switching and that. So what I might do is make a rolling table on wheels with some industries on it that I can just, for operating nights, just roll it up and connect it up and make some fictitious industries they could switch.
Yeah, that would be a nice idea.
And then I can take it off anytime I want. So now, as you can see here, now we're heading into the other room. We're down to still just the 2 main lines now. And he's just about getting to the point where he's going to start climbing uphill. Right now it's still flat and level. As you can see, we're out, you know, we still have staging above us here, but this is the end of that first big peninsula. So right about where the locomotive is right now, it's starting to begin to grade. It starts out at about a 0.5% till it gets halfway around the peninsula. Then it's about a 1% for the rest of the peninsula, and then after that it goes to 1.6 for the rest of the climb.
Is the railroad double track or single track?
It's double track just to the end of, I'll show you that real quick before he gets there. Just as you come around here, it comes back together and becomes single track for the rest of the way. So this is called Tobin if you look on the map. In reality, it's pretty much a straight shot. I had to put it on the end, extend it around the peninsula. I really wanted it to look right, but I couldn't get it long enough to cut the helpers in and still keep one train on one main while another train is passing on. From this switch back to the one at the junction is long enough, 60 cars, that I could, you know, still be cutting in the second set of helpers and not have it follow this switch that a train coming downhill couldn't pass it on the other track. If you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So from this switch all the way back to the Y is on this track is 60 cars. So oftentimes as one's being built on this track, cutting in helpers, another one coming downhill can pass it and head into Helena on the other main.
Then how many operators will your layout take?
How many operators?
Yep.
Oh, I would say we should easily be able to employ, you know, 12 to 15 people on a session, depending on how many trains with helpers. I'm literally going to run manned helpers, so you could have 3 guys running one train.
What's the minimal of operators can your layout host?
I haven't figured that out yet because I haven't actually had an operating session yet with the new layout or with this portion of the layout. So this is where my old layout was less than a year ago, and now it's all been replaced. So here you can see it's still climbing uphill and it's heading toward Austin. If I get the camera around on the other side, you can see he's just passing through the East Austin, the switch on the east end of the Austin siding. So right here, the siding breaks off. And right about here, it's going to basically go in behind scenery and become hidden. Right now you can see he's, remember that hidden single loop helix that I showed you on the drawing before? That's where he's at right now. So that's, the lower one there is a loop, and that will be hidden by scenery. Oh, that's interesting. I had a little glitch there. This is amazing because from the helix till almost the helix, this entire main line, there's not a single jumper. That's almost 300 feet of track. Phil and I were shocked when we were able to run a train around the entire thing without a problem the first time we tried. Oh yeah, one switch was a sticky, and once we cleaned it up, you know, it was causing a lock. There wasn't one bad joiner. And what I did was I used Code 83 Atlas track and then N scale Atlas joiners. Let me see if I can show you. I don't know if it's going to focus well or not, but I haven't put in all my little filler ties yet, but those N scale joiners are almost invisible. I really like that, but they're also nice and tight. That's one of the reasons. Oh, I got to catch up to my train now. Here he's actually already past the West Austin switch. So I wasn't able to finish. I ran out of track. This is the other end of the Austin siding. And this is really cool. This is what going to be basically my signature scene. If you can see, the train is right now looping around in a horseshoe. And if you follow that track, right now it's back to being visible. Now it's going to go around and cut back the other way. This is exactly, you know, pretty much exactly the way it's like in real life, as a double horseshoe curve. And if you stand down here at Austin and look up, you'll see at the mid-level, you see the train coming back this way. And then on the top, you'll see it go back again across the top. If a train was 2 miles long, you'd see it on all 3 levels at once in real life. Mine is a little condensed version of it, but it's actually, I'll be doing the scenery correctly, that if you stood right here and kind of looked up, it's just going to look like one continuous scene all the way back to the wall, even though there's that big area to stand right in between the upper loop right there. So it's, you know, it's going to take a little bit of work, but just by doing the scenery correctly, and I've kind of planned it that way right from the start, you should be able to stand here now and see it look like one continuous landscape all the way to the back where the train is right now.
How will you get back there if a train gets a derailment?
Train's not going to derail. Good track work. I spent a lot of time making sure my track work was really good, and I have not had a derailment yet other than, you know, a switch that was in the wrong position. So knock on wood, that remains the case. And I'm hoping I tried a new method for laying my track that I haven't done before. I used 1/2-inch plywood, and then there's this 1/4-inch pink fan fold foam. There's I'll show you a pile of it on the floor there. It says it's 1/4-inch thick, and it comes in these 4 foot wide by 500 foot long, I think it was. And they call it fan fold foam. I use it like for insulating houses or something. But you know, I glued that foam to the plywood, and then I glued the cork to the foam, and then I used a latex caulk to glue the track to the cork. And I'm hoping what that does is I'm hoping that stays stable enough that it never really warps with cold or heat, or, you know, if the layout expands or contracts. I'm hoping that, unlike nailed track that can bend in and out between the nails, I think this, because this is held on every single tie.
I'm holding for you at the Skyline Trestle.
Oh yeah, okay. He's holding for me at the Skyline Trestle. So why don't you just stop it right there once. So anyways, I'm going to go back to where we were at Austin and work my way up to the train real quick. Just going to come through here. So here's the end of the Austin siding again, like I said, and this is once again modeled just like the real thing. So as we continue up, if you look on an aerial photo right now, you're going to see 2 tracks here where I only have one. This switch used to end the siding right here, and then there's a road that crosses right here that I'll be putting in. But eventually what they did was went ahead and lengthened the siding so it was way out up this curve. And in real life, it was a whole lot longer than if I lengthened it to there. And now most recently, bringing it along, so it's now double tracked all the way up here, all the way around the upper horseshoe, and all the way almost to here. But in the middle of this upper horseshoe is a giant ridge. It's kind of like a ridge. I'm gonna see if I can reach out and show you, but the ridge comes out and down. It starts climbing. It's like the end of it. They call it Iron Ridge. But on this side of it, they had actually a huge cut. So they kind of went around the edge of the ridge and then cut right through it. There used to be a tunnel, and I'll be modeling that. That's just to one side of this. But they stopped using that tunnel after they daylighted the ridge and put a big cut through it. So in essence, right, this whole area right here will be a real high ridge, tapering down almost to where the track is over here, with a giant cut right here. So then once you start heading up this way, wow, I'm down to 28% battery, so we better get going. You work your way up to the point. One thing I didn't model was a curved trestle that would be between here and the loop that we just looked at, the upper horseshoe loop. But I did end up, there's actually 2 curved trestles on the Mullen Pass. I'm only modeling one of them, and that's going to be the Skyline Trestle. That's going to be right here. I'm sitting on the trestle right now. It's a big curved trestle, and I can actually model it full scale. So it'll start here about this car and come all the way around to here. And here's kind of a picture of what it looks like. For some reason, the angle of this picture doesn't show how curved it actually is, but if you get on Google Earth and look straight down on it in an aerial satellite or an aerial view, you can see there's actually quite a good amount of curve. So it's going to be one of these fun trestles to model because you have to not only curve it, but have it continue to pick up height while it's curving. So that kind of adds a little complexity to the building of the bridge. But, you know, I'm going to use the Central Valley kit that they have that's very similar to this, and I'll be able to make this bridge look almost correct. Just going to have a bit of a trouble trying to figure out how to do the handrails, but probably 3D printing eventually will take care of that. So anyways, after you come around the skyline trestle, or just before the skyline trestle, I want to show you this too. You can see how it kind of curves out toward the aisle, and then it starts curving back in before it comes onto the trestle right here. There's a really cool rock cut. Here's a picture of it right here. So you can see that the back end of that train is actually curving. That would be like curving back toward the wall. So it goes through this really neat rock cut, and then all of a sudden it pops out and comes over the trestle. So that's what this scene right here is going to be. And then if I turn around in the same spot, you can see that it pretty much immediately gets onto the trestle within a couple feet of there. And once you get off the trestle on the other side, I'll have Phil start going again now. Now we're getting pretty close to the summit. In real life, after it crosses the skyline trestle, it comes and takes this curve. Let's go over the... Might have to come over here where the signal can go, or just give it a little shove. A little operational issue here. Get the train going. Just stop it again and restart it. Okay, sorry, I just had to go walk over to the train real quick. Oh, it feels like it's going. One of the trail unit is not running right now. That's why the lead run. Oh. Oh, there it goes. So anyways, in real life, this only does about 2/3 of this curve. I had to curve all the way around the full peninsula just because I ran out of room. But after it comes around this curve, it's going to go into the Mullen Tunnel. And there'll be a portal right about here where the camera is. And if you look at this, you can see I got a little wood cut of the other portal. So from this point forward, we're in the Mullen Tunnel. And we're still climbing now. If you look at where I'm standing, I can lower down. There's the staging deck. And you come all the way down here to the lower deck. So if I turn around and stand in the picture, you can see that's about eye level for me right now. So this is getting up there. So here comes the train entering the Mullen Tunnel right now, if you use your imagination. And then once it exits the tunnel, it's only, in real life, you know, a couple 100 yards from the summit. But as you can see, the bench work, I don't know how good it's going to show up on the camera. You can actually see the summit in the bench work right here.
It's awesome in person.
Yeah, it's incredible. So right there is the sign that says Continental Divide. Oops, I don't know if I lost you for a second. I'm down to 18% on my battery, so we got about 5 minutes, 10 minutes left. So here you can kind of see, actually the better view is from this way. You can see how the train is arching up and then back down again right at the summit here. It's really cool. And this whole scene I can actually model in correct scale. The distance between like the tunnel portal and this little shed that's hiding behind the train right now. This is called Blossberg. It's at the summit. There's a little building there, an old maintenance building. And then as you can see, there's the start of another siding. So this is another passing point right here, a passing siding. It actually runs from here all the way back to the Helix. And once again, you could have a 60-car train sitting here. So in real life, if I set this down now, you can kind of really see how it comes up over the hill and then starts coming back down. But everything from this little Continental Divide sign that little mock-up sign that I made of a real one that's there. The distance from that to the building and the distance from the building to the switch, and from the switch to the signal over here. I actually didn't have to use any modeler's license, if you will. This entire scene up here at Blossburg will actually be true scale for everything. And that's kind of cool. That's something you normally can't do. You know, you got to condense everything when you're modeling. But so from this point forward, as soon as there's more track, I'll be able to finish this passing siding, and it's going to run, as you can see, along the wall there. He's running, and it's going to go all the way back to the Helix over there, and then back into staging. So as you can see, it's a pretty big, nice, big, long run, but there's really no towns for switching or anything. I just love being able to run a purely long train. Here's an interesting thing too. This Northern Pacific hopper or gondola, there's actually one sitting up there. They made an icebreaker for the tunnel. So I have to take this, and I found pictures, and they built some big steel framework over the top of it with these spikes and everything. And what they did is, the idea was to run it through the tunnel and knock off icicles. And one of the reasons being that they run all those Boeing trains through there. There's 737 fuselages come from Kansas City to Seattle over the MRL all the time. And last thing you need is an icicle punching a hole in a fuselage of a 737 that wasn't built yet. So, but you see this thing, this icebreaker car sitting in a lot of the pictures. There's actually, I don't have them in yet. There's actually going to be a couple more tracks here. There's a little bit of a, it's like two additional tracks besides the main track and the passing siding. On this side of the main, there's like 2 more tracks. And then right up over here is going to be a little Y where they used to turn, they don't use it anymore, but it was used to turn steamers back in the day when steam locomotives were the helpers. So there'll be a little Y up here yet too. That's all kind of weed covered.
Small yard to take off the engines and stuff, or like a crew change point, or do they?
Well, back in the steam days, the steam helpers were pretty much pushers that pushed on the back end. And when they got to the top of the hill, because they were steamers, they didn't back downhill all the way. They used the Y to turn it. So here's a little golden. Here's my golden spike. We had a golden spike party that one night, and it's kind of a tradition among our round robin group is somebody paints up a bunch of these and then we all sign it. So you see a bunch of signatures on there, and we have a golden spike party. And actually right about here in the middle of this track would be where the real golden spike is for me. So that's my NCE radio transmitter. But as you come around this corner, you can see I did cut in the switch for those, where those extra 2 tracks come back to the main. And then from here on down, it's actually did paint this track already. But this is main line on the right and the passing siding on the left. And it basically stays that way all the way back to the Helix now. And if I just jump down below here, you can see that our train is back in staging now, heading back to where, parked back where he started from. And his tail end, if I hurry up, is just coming off the Helix into the yard throw of the staging yard. So he basically came down this way, got onto the Helix, made the one turn, and then it just cuts right back underneath here into staging now. That's pretty much a walk around the entire layout. Just a couple other things I'll point out real quick. Like I showed you before, I'm using servos to throw all the staging and our turnouts because they're a nice small profile. I intentionally kept this profile as low as possible so I'd have a nice visual angle down on the lower deck. I didn't want any obstructions, and I want this fascia to be as thin as possible. So between the LED lighting strips, these are just temporarily hung for now as a test. But between the LED lighting and these little servos, I'll have no problem. I actually took 1x4s, which are, everybody knows, is actually 3.5, and I ripped them down to 3 inches. So this is only a 3-inch piece right here, a 1x3, if you will, but a true dimension is 3 inches, not 3.5. So I actually used quite a few different methods for constructing my bench work. This whole lower deck and the whole staging deck is all Homosote over plywood, 1/2-inch plywood, 1/2-inch Homosote, and I just painted it all tan. As you can see, there's the plywood layer and the Homosote layer. The reason I did that is because I learned a long time ago it's easy to move these tracks around until you get them where you want them. You just spike them in and they hold really good in Homosote. Eventually what I'm going to do is when I ballast this, I'm going to end up pulling all the spikes. And the same thing here, this is all code 100 in the staging yard. My entire Helix and the whole staging yard is all code 100 repurposed. There's not one brand new stick. Well, maybe 3 or 4 when I ran short one day, but almost 100% repurposed, fully acquired code 100 track. The rest of the layout, all the visible portion, if you will, the scenic portion, the actual layout is all code 83 Atlas with a combination of Atlas and Shinohara turnouts. But all the yard ladders, turnouts are overs are number 8s or number 10s. All the staging yard turnouts are number 6s. So really, all my turnouts are 6, 8, or 10. There's nothing smaller than a 6 on this layout. Interesting part going back to this Helix, if you notice, this is how I attached the track. Just a small number 6 screw and a flat washer that's low enough that it's down below the railhead height so you don't hit it with a coupler. And you can easily reach in here. If I ever need to tweak this, I just get a stubby little Phillips head screwdriver, and if it ever warped, I could go ahead and adjust that. There's no reason to spike it or glue it. It's in Helix. It's not a scenic part of the layout. So I really didn't care. All I wanted was reliability, bulletproof reliability. So I'm down to 4% battery, so I'm going to have to cut off the phone and switch back to my computer. I'll see you in a couple of seconds. All right. Can you hear me? All right. Yeah, I just couldn't figure. I tried with that laptop, and it's like no way that's going to work. So figured the best way to actually show you the whole thing was with the iPhone. But battery's done for, so in fact I'm going to just plug it in real quick here. So anybody have any questions burning questions you want answered?
What's the secret? What's the grade on the Helix?
What's the grade in the Helix? That's actually that's a 2.2%. That's actually a real 2.2%. That was done for 2 reasons. I had to put it. If you notice, I could probably show you this with the computer because it's right here. You see that door right there? I only had 5 feet to play with for that Helix because of that door, and I really didn't want to redo the wall at that time. Probably should have. You know, the 5 feet dictated that I could use a 27 and a 29.5 inch on the Helix. So the inner track on the Helix is 27, outer is 29.5. It turned out to be perfect. 2.2% grade got me the heights I was looking for. The lower deck is at 34 inch all throughout Helena and all the way until it begins the uphill climb. The upper deck is at 54 inch. I mean the staging deck. And then the upper deck starts at 58 inches and climbs to 5 inches before it's down again. So That was one of the reasons I cut those 1x4s down, cut a ½ an inch off of them. Actually, I think I cut a full inch off. I should grab it. They might be only 2.5. It was a couple years ago when I cut them, but
yeah, I got a question here from Dwight.
Okay.
He asked earlier, said, when you wired, did you attach each wire and test, or did you attach all wires and then find a bad one? Feeder wires.
Well, be honest with you, the only thing I have, I always just, and then tested it, but the only thing that's really wired right now is the Helix wired, and I have 1/2 of the staging yard, you know, from the Helix to like that first about 45 cars in is the only thing that's wired right now. I don't have the entire layout in the rest of the room. There's not a single feeder on any of that new part that I just built, the whole uphill climb all the way up to Blossburg. There's not a single feeder in there anywhere. You know, basically from the base of the Helix all the way through the Helena yard, all the way up to Blossburg on the uphill climb, there's not a single feeder. Not until you get onto the Blossburg siding closer to the Helix, you know, about where the Golden Spike was, from there to the Helix has feeders. Half of the staging yard has feeders and the Helix has feeders. That's all I have in so far. Yeah, I do typically. Go ahead, Johnny.
Now, what kind of power you use? Is that just a 5-amp system running the whole layout?
Yeah, right now I have the NCE Powerhouse Pro 5-amp system. I also have my old SB3 Smart Booster that I bought. I originally had the Power Cab system. Excuse me. And I bought the SB3, which was, but then they had problems with that and they replaced it with the SB3A, which was actually 5 amps. So for a while I was just running the Smart Cab, you know, on my old layout I was running the Power Cab with the Smart Booster. Eventually I wanted to get into radio throttle, so I ended the whole system, you know, knowing that I was building this layout. So what you can do is you can take that Smart Booster, open it up and pull a jumper and turn it into a dumb booster. So that's going to give me a second 5 amps for a different booster district. For those of you that aren't quite sure what a booster district is, you actually have more than one booster,
yeah,
powering different portions of the layout.
But for right now, that whole layout is being ran off of 5 amps.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And very few feeders.
Now, the reason why I was kind of bringing it up.
Good track.
Yeah, because the reason why I bring it up is, you know, you always have some people that will, they think they've got to have a lot more power. And it really depends on how much trains you got running. But you got a huge layout and running just one train tonight, but all on 5 amps. So.
Yeah, when I start running, you know, full trains, I'm definitely probably going to have, I'm not going to go to more amps, I'm just going to go to more booster districts.
Yeah.
So that there's less locomotives in any district at a given time.
More circuit.
You know, it's not a good idea to go to 10 amps in HO scale. There's, you know, Digitrax finally decided to come up with an 8 amp, which is probably what I would consider the max you'd want to use on HO scale. You know, 10 amps, you could just so destroy something.
Well, I got the 8 amp. Yeah, I mean, I've got an 8 amps Digitrax, and you still have to use the PM42 or some kind of circuit breaker that's a 5 amp output to do power districts, because at 8 amps, if you short out, you're going to weld the wheels to the track. That means you're replacing wheels and track.
10 amps, you can start your layout on fire, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, back to your question.
Go ahead.
You were asking about what I use for breakers, Andy. I've got the power shields. Right now, one's got a reverser and one doesn't. I've only got 3 sections set up with the power shields. I have another one to use, and I'm going to have to buy some more after that. So.
Yeah, as long as you have the proper breakers that kick at the right point. So, like my DCC system is based on a single power supply. So, you know, it'll be 30 amps of power into the base system. But you subdivide it by circuit breakers so that no place, it doesn't matter how many amps you have. You could have a 500 amp power supply running your layout as long as no particular section of your layout can short out and draw all 30 of those amps. You know, otherwise you may shoot your bedroom into outer space or something. That's a lot of power. So yeah, just isolation is key. But how many, the question I was going to ask you, how many locomotives are you talking about? That helper, fascinated with helpers anyway, of course. That's what I model as well. But it's steam, so a couple locomotives. But you're talking about like 4 to 6 head end power, 2 or 3 cut in, and 2 or 3 tail end pushers.
Yeah, it's going to depend on a lot of experimentation. I don't, as we've had a discussion before, and for the benefit of the people that weren't around for those discussions, I'm learning real quick that you do not want to overpower your train. If I tried to simulate real life and run those 15 locomotives on a 120 car train, I'm going to have broken parts and thousands of dollars laying on the floor. If I go ahead and start using either dummies or pulling a drive shaft out of each one, it's key running long trains in HO scale, and I can't talk for other scales, this is only HO. The key is to make sure you have just enough power to get the job done, so that if one locomotive stalls, you don't string line your train. You'll let slipping just be power to move that train. And that's the key to not putting cars on the floor. String lining them or pushing them off the outside of a curve because of too much power. And it's real easy to do that if you try and match what the prototype has done, because we just don't use the tonnage that they do. You know.
Well, they have one big factor. If you cut the power on a full size 1-to-1 locomotive, it coasts. It goes into neutral. It just slides down the track. Now cut the power on one of your locomotives and see how well it coasts. There's a few brass manufacturers out there that have put clutches in their locomotives. So in the absence of power, they free roll. And I've been experimenting with that. I've got a locomotive where I've got free rolling built into that. If you could do that, then you could recreate the real world. But I'm as prototype gets, just like you, brother. But we can't recreate the prototype exactly. The physics are just not in our favor. We're still dealing with 1-to-1
so
gravity.
You got to cheat a little bit.
We got to cheat. It's an illusion. You're just trying to get the illusion.
You got to cheat. Like when I had my old layout set up and I tied this portion, like the Helena portion, I had that big 4% grade connected to my old layout because of the different heights, and it had a curve right at the top. And I could only really get away with about a 24-inch radius, no bigger. Well, I found out that, okay, what the power it takes me to get up that hill, if I tried a really long train, yeah, I could power it enough to get it up that hill. But if you go like 60 cars without a helper, the weight of those cars alone, when that head end makes that curve, the weight of them pull the right off of the track because you don't have a helper. So the key to that is to make sure that you don't have a head to pull it up that hill if that's the situation that's going to happen. Either that or make sure you got a pusher on the back end or a mid-train helper. So by balancing your power to the point where it can't possibly get in a situation where it throws cars on the ground, and it's very doable. I'm learning, and that's why I've been experimenting slowly to run a helper train on this layout since I finished it, is because I need to find the starting point of those train helpers.
Yeah.
Where they're going to cause problems, and I have the problems yet, so haven't got to the point where I can even try helpers yet. So.
Well, two things is one, part of the reason that I do the funny weight thing that I do, I don't follow NMRA spec. I'm massively overweight. Joe Fugate's doing that. Mike Confalone kind of brought it to prominence a few years ago, to massively overweight cars because of running helpers and some of that. The NMRA specs do not get us anything close to prototypical weight. It's a good minimum spec for flat track. Trains will run and track okay, but massively overweighting cars helps tremendously with helpers. But I don't care what you do, you're never going to figure this balance of helpers out. The real world solves this problem for us, in my opinion. In the real world, there's all these dynamics, like it's all these variables. The how slippery the track is on a given day, leaves on the track, to moisture, to all kinds of things. How well a locomotive is performing, how much weight's in the train. There's all these variables. So the engineers had to work collectively together and figure that out. So you push from the tail end and just pull the front end away from it, and you can make that work. But current keepers are your friend, because if you lose power for a brief moment, you're going to have issues.
Yeah. So Josh, going back to when you asked me earlier about what I'm going to car forwarding system, this kind of ties into that. And I kind of mentioned that, well, I don't have a lot of switching, so I really don't need a car forwarding system. But what I am going to do is use from JMRI. You have the ability to enter your cars and their weights, their actual, scale weight, like 4.5 ounces, and then it converts it to a real, prototype tonnage, if you will. So kind of taking what Andy said and mixing it with what you were asking, the way I'm going to use JMRI is actually to generate a switch list, but the switch list isn't really going to be a switch list. It's going to be just a list of cars and the actual tonnage. So if I have all my cars entered with data and I want to add a new car to a train, I'll be setting them up as unit trains, or kernels as they call them in JMRI, but I'll know what the tonnage on my kernel is. And when I get done experimenting with my locomotives and the consists I want to run together, I'll be able to know how much tonnage each of those consists can. So I'll be able to actually adapt on the fly without experimentation once I have all that data entered and ran my initial experiments, if you will. Well, my goal is to use the JMRI switch list, but not to tell you where to send a car, but to tell you how much tonnage you're hauling and what kind of helpers I'm going to need to put it up the hill.
Yeah, so I know there was also including helpers. I know there was one guy to try to solve that problem. He took a Katy coupler and took out the spring, so it was just like pretty much didn't close on it on the back helper. It was pretty much just like a pushing bar.
Yeah, you can just push, and then you at the end when you get to the top, you can just back off without having to stop and uncouple.
Yeah.
Speed release, like the CNO always done. They did a speed release.
Yeah, I got a comment here from Ron Brights from Australia. This was back a little bit earlier when y'all were talking. If all the locos are speed match, surely they should work. So long as there are no drop in the track power feed, it should work.
So, what if you get a dirty spot on a wheel and that locomotive stops for a moment? It happens. That's why current keepers are so handy. But speed matching is
another reason why. That's another reason why I'm going to have man helper sets.
I think you have to. And the biggest thing is the grade varies on all real railroads, on your railroad, and on my railroad. At the beginning, when they're starting to shove, they're shoving on my layout from 1% and going up to 2.4. So as the head end is really under some strain, the tail end could push cars like crazy. So you can't just speed match the locomotives. They're under different stress conditions.
Well, and when you go to a long run like mine, okay, you can match them really pretty close. And for a shorter layout, you're going to be just fine. And I'm talking with back EMF. Okay, I like to have one of my locomotives in each consist have back EMF on, and then none of the rest of them.
That's what I do.
So what it does is it keeps you consistent from one set to the other, but then you won't get any back EMF fighting if the rest of them have the back EMF off. So with the back EMF, you could have two of them that are, run almost perfect, but that very slight difference is slowly going to accumulate. And if it takes 400 to really makes a difference, most layouts you can't run 400 feet. You're going to either come to a town and stop and do some switching and change directions or something. If I haven't seen be honest with you, I've seen longer layouts than mine. I haven't seen one with a longer run where you're just doing pure running like that, you know, without a town or anything, where you run from Helena all the way up to Blossburg. That has a run that long with that you're just pure running. So the slightest little difference, if you're running back EMF, can accumulate over that long distance to the point where by the time you're halfway up that hill, you could be fighting or really putting some tension on the couplers. So I want live operators watching the slack in the couplers and adjusting their speed accordingly, rather than depending on one operator with 3 sets of locomotives hoping they're absolutely perfectly speed matched.
Well, I mean, and another thing to consider is that back EMF would do a good job. If you took a set of 3 locomotives with back EMF turned on and you run them across level ground and you headed them up a grade and went all the way around the layout through various grades, they would stay at a fairly consistent speed with back EMF turned up pretty high. However, when you put a bunch of weight on them, they are going to respond. There is going to be variables in there, and that may be enough to throw cars off. In my experience, it was. I was a member of a club years ago. We had a helper district, but that was in DC. And what we had to do is wait till the train was entirely on the grade, keep the grade exactly the same all the way through to be able to push with trains under DC power. It was impossible, but you had to consist essentially.
There's the track supervisors here. Came down to check things out. So yeah, I know what you mean, and that's, you know, it's a really interesting world when you get into consisting, especially longer and longer trains and longer distances. It just, you know, you have to be more and more precise in what you're doing. And I think without the way to not have to be so precise is by adding the human element. You know, put a guy there, teach him how to watch the slack in your couplers, and, you know, speed up a little when you have to and slow down a little when you don't. And you really shouldn't run into those issues other than if the guy makes a huge mistake.
Yeah, I got a comment here from Sparky 107. This is towards Andy. I guess you're going to have to get with Barry and be a guest on his show. And that's, he said, Andy, you need to do a show on installing current keepers, where and on what different brands, and where brands. That would be a good show. Well, I think, LOL.
Yeah, well, and I'm building my own for like 30 cents a piece.
Yeah.
So 4 caps and a diode, couple parts. There's nothing to a current keeper. It's just a capacitor. But, and a lot of people like to argue the benefits of these one way or the other. If you have a lift out section, current keepers can cause you some difficulty if that's lifted out. There are ways to get around it, but it requires some intelligence. But for guys like me and Chris that are doing these challenging operational systems, it's pretty hard to get that perfectly reliable conductivity off from that track rail.
The more cars you run, and I mean, I even still run metal wheels, and I've found that just running these longer trains, the track does get dirty faster. You know, less cars, it doesn't matter. I mean, I do have some older cars yet that probably have dirtier wheels, and, you know, you start running these longer trains around, you're putting more wheels on the rail faster, and the dirt accumulates, because some of that literally comes from arcing and sparking of the locomotive wheels, that black grunge. I mean, you can clean your track, go run the train, come back, and it's black again. Well, that, you know,
it gets worse.
Some of it comes from yeah, microscopic arcing and sparking. You know.
Yeah, are you going to run resistor wheel sets so you can do current detection?
Yeah, eventually.
I am too, and also that causes additional arcing and carbonization. So everything that we want to do causes this problem of reliability to suffer. And current keepers or capacitors are the easiest, cheapest way to solve that problem at the moment for most of us. I'm in a unique situation. I have really large steam locomotives, so I'm pretty sure I'm going battery power. I just can't make them, you just can't make them run smooth and reliable.
We're gonna give you a peek at the big boy there. See if I can
That is not an appropriate sound for a consist of SD40s. There's something else going on there.
Let's just say Union Pacific restored their big boy really faster than they thought about.
Well, I think we lost Chris here for a second. His internet's gone out.
We got sound from it, but yeah, we're still there. But your video quality's went down to grayscale.
Yeah,
suffering so bad. It does sound good though. I love the sound of Steve, of course. Somewhat, we can hear you.
yeah, I can't hear him at all. Tell him to do a refresh.
Yeah, if you just do a refresh.
Hear me?
Yeah, will you do a refresh, Chris?
Okay, I'm back. Yeah, I tried unplugging from my network cable and lost the connection. So.
Yeah, Johnny still doesn't have you yet, though. You'll have to do a
Yeah, I got it. I got it. I got it.
Okay. And the Bob says it sounds like an SD40 to him, so I'm not exactly sure who's been doing the sound programming on your locals.
So for those that get guys that, especially my stepdad, he teases me about, you know, the diesels. He's like a 1910 steam guy. Well, see, I got steam.
And it goes off to the sunset.
Yeah. So.
I think all railroad.
What time do we got here? 9:30.
Okay. If you're running wide
Any other questions out there?
No.
I do.
All right.
The pink foam you showed before, do you find that that's a good sound barrier for the trains in lieu of homosoap?
It seems to be.
Well, he's got cork
you
on
know,
top.
right now it is. You know, with the cork on the foam.
Yeah, I'm ignoring the roadbed, assuming that everybody
All bets
was
are off.
roadbed.
All bets are off when I ballast it. You know, I really can't comment until after I ballast it, because unless somebody plans on just running the foam and the cork without ever ballasting, it's really not a true gauge. Andy looked like he went to sleep there, all locked up.
No, he's fine.
Okay. He is on mine, but I just don't think I recovered from that connection fully yet. But yeah, the reason I did it was to give myself extra height on my roadbed. I don't find torque to be high enough for most of your typical roadbed profiles. So that the whole reason I put that was not for sound at all, but to give me an extra 1/4 inch of height. And once I trim it away to match the cork, some areas, I don't know if you noticed, maybe it wasn't noticeable, but some areas I've already trimmed it away. So I just kind of extended the cut off of the cork down with the foam. And in other areas, the foam is still running out and I haven't cut it off yet. But
Yeah.
the whole reason I did that was just to raise the profile to get those more realistic ditches and raised roadbed.
DeBob's in-scale man cave, he said, I forgot, do you have a reverse loop on the layout?
I have one in staging. I have the end of staging, the 2-track balloon loop, if you will. So what I did was I cut the staging in half. You know, the first 5 tracks that run all the way down to the far end are on one set of buses, or one bus, if you will. And then if you cut that peninsula right down the middle and shave off the other 4 tracks coming all the way back. And actually, that's really only, I take it back, it's not because of the reverse loop, it's because of the crossovers I have at the head end of staging. Actually, if I took those crossovers out of the head end of staging, the entire track would be, you know, one giant folded, contorted, twisted dog bone, if you will, just because of that, just because of that crossover too, or the extra shortcut I have. If you think about it, it's really that whole staging yard is just an extension of the Helix, the outer track on the Helix. It's just like a giant extension of that outer track on the Helix that runs way around and comes all the way back. But because I put those crossovers at the yard throat there so that you could go to any track from any track in staging, I had to cut it in half and make 4 of them on one bus and make that a reversing bus, and then the other 5 are on a normal bus. Yeah. Without those 2 crossovers, there's no reverse loops anywhere else in the layout. Not until I connect my Y. When I build that little peninsula and connect the Y, there'll be another one there.
Yeah. Well, I think we pretty well run the length of it. We got an hour 30 on it. You got, got anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I'm all good.
Yep. No questions in the chat. All righty.
Well, thanks for watching.
Yeah, let's close it. Yeah, we got to close real quick. I see Josh running for the microphone.
I did have one question though. When you put in your signal system, what was the type of signals were your railroad running at the time you're modeling?
There were actually a few semaphores left, believe it or not, but the majority of them were just the single head, tricolor lights or whatever you call them, searchlights.
Searchlights, yeah. They were.
There actually are a couple semaphores left on the system, but not on the portion that I'm modeling. So, kind of out of luck there. The signal I had sitting up there is the only signal I have, and that was kind of like a searchlight signal, but it's not really the right one. So yeah, eventually it'll be all block detected and signaled and CTC run from a JMRI panel.
Yeah.
Till that's going to be Mother May I.
All righty. Well, I guess we'll wind this one on up here. Appreciate it, Chris. You made some really good progress on your layout.
Yeah, now comes the fun part, wiping scenery. Andy said he's going to come and help me out with the scenery. Now, I'm a technical guy. That's great at bench work and track work and fixing locomotives, but boy, when it comes to art,
that's no excuse.
Only hoping
brother.
I can do it half the justice I have pictured in my head. So
that's no excuse, brother. I can hold
thanks,
the
guys.
engineer card high. I'm an engineer by trade, by personality, by education. I am an engineer through and through. But
how are you, Johnny?
But I do a lot of the artistry. Love it now.
All right. Okay. Okay. Want to say thank you, Chris, for the layout tour. And go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com. There you can check schedules for the Tuesday and the Wednesday shows. Those are at 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern. The live show and the Thursday hangouts are at 9 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Be sure and click on the eMag and sign up for a notification when the eMag comes out. JD and his team do a great job producing a free magazine with and the articles in there are written by people of the community, for the community. And it's got some really great content. JD and his team do a great job of putting that magazine together and making it really look good. Also, yeah, lost my train of thought again. It's getting a little bad here. Anyway, I did want to let everybody know, as you've noticed, we've on the last Thursday show and this show here, we've used a new format for doing the shows. It seems like everybody likes this format, the way it's working out. We're getting a lot clearer videos now, so a lot of the issues that we might have is going to be just in the internet or older machines that people are using in the hangouts. But this is called Appear, APPEAR.N. Our nightly hangouts are You can find those on appearin/YouTube Mall Builders. That's where we've been having the hangouts at for the past week now. Everybody likes this format a lot better. We can have 12 people in that room, but that's because we upgraded that to a premium package, and several of the participants in that hangout have donated money to offset the cost of it. So if you'd like to, definitely want to have everybody in the hangouts. We can have other rooms. They're free rooms. They can only have 8 people in those. So if we start getting a lot of people in for the main page, we can go over to another room and still continue conversations a lot easier than what we could when we're using the Google Hangouts. So, and we want everybody's comments on what you think about this and how it's working. So that's appear.in/YouTube Mall Builders. That's the main page there. Well, that's it for tonight. We're gonna wrap this one up, put her in the can. We shall see y'all. Let's see. Let me look real quick. Well, I got a Thursday night show this week on 29th. And then we've got, I haven't marked up. Alright, I have got the full year schedule now on the website. Our next show is going to be an Arduino show, which the Arduino workshop with Chris. That's going to be on July the 5th. That'll be Wednesday. That'll be at 8 o'clock Central Time. You can go to the website and check the schedule, because all the schedule's complete now for the rest of the year. Alright, y'all have a good night, and we shall see you Thursday night.